Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word and to a slightly different and massively more opinionated qualifying report for the Brazilian Grand Prix. And what a session it was. We had some great laps, a sprinkling of rain and a fair bit of controversy thrown in as well. But before I talk too much about all of that, let's start as we always do by having a quick look at the final result from the session. It was Lewis Hamilton who took pole position for the race this afternoon, with Sebastian Vettel in second place, less than a tenth behind, very close between Ferrari and Mercedes pretty much all weekend so far. Valtteri Bottas in third with Kimi Räikkönen in fourth. Red Bull showed good long run pace on Friday, but unfortunately with that long run down the straights, they didn't have the power to keep up with those top two teams. They're half a second off, with Max Verstappen fifth and Daniel Ricciardo sixth, but of course he's got to take a 5-place grid drop as well. Marcus Ericsson qualified a career best 7th, fantastic lap from him in Q3 with Charles Leclerc just behind in 8th. Haas definitely back on pace this weekend with Romain Grosjean in 9th and Pierre Gasly a really good lap in at Toro Rosso. He finished the session in 10th place. Kevin Magnussen ended up in 11th place, of course will get promoted with Daniel Ricciardo's penalty, with the Force Indias of Sergio Perez and Esteban Ocon 12th and 13th, and Ocon himself has got to take a penalty, having changed his gearbox this weekend. It was a pretty disappointing day for Renault. Nico Hülkenberg down in 14th with Carlos Sainz in 16th and getting knocked out in Q1. Fantastic lap from Sergei Sirotkin in that first session to get through into Q2 and ended up 15th overall. Of course, getting promoted as Esteban Ocon takes that penalty. Brendan Hartley down in 17th. Fernando Alonso only 18th. Lance Stroll in the second Williams was 19th. And bringing up the rear once again was Stoffel Van Dorn in the second McLaren. So, here we go then. It was Lewis Hamilton who took pole position for Mercedes, the team's 100th by the way, but it didn't come without incident. On the run down to turn 4, Hamilton was caught quickly by Kimi Räikkönen, who was on a flying lap, and the Finn was forced to swerve around the Mercedes after Lewis Hamilton appeared to be trying to get out of Kimi Räikkönen's way. It just looked like a bit of confusion in that one, and on the face of it, it didn't look as though Kimi Räikkönen lost any time, and after the session, he did say that Lewis Hamilton did nothing wrong in his view. But that wasn't all. The Brit, who was slow on the racing line and preparing for a flying lap himself, moved to the left to let a fast-approaching Sergei Sirotkin through. However, Sirotkin had also made the decision to move to the left and go around the Mercedes, with the Williams ending up with 2 wheels on the grass, avoiding what would have been a huge crash between the two of them. For whatever reason, the stewards did not even investigate the incident at all, and no reference was made of it. And for the record, that's where my issue is. This won't go down well, I know it won't, but whatever. Do I think Hamilton should have been given a penalty? Yes, I do. And I don't care if it's an in-lap, an out-lap, or a flying lap. Absolutely no, he didn't impede Sergei Sirotkin because they were both on an out-lap. But the move itself was still dangerous and could have resulted in a very nasty accident. And before it starts getting thrown around, yes, I know these are split-second decisions being made at very high speed generally. And so these things, miscommunications if you like, are always going to rear their head at some point. But it's still dangerous though. My big issue with this is that the stewards didn't even look at it. Had that been, I don't know, Van Dorn and Stroll for example, you can bet your backside that that would have at least been investigated. And even if the outcome was the same, we would have been given some sort of explanation as to why it's not a penalty, if that makes sense. And maybe Charlie Whiting will come out on Monday and say why it wasn't investigated or why they don't see it needed to be a penalty. He sometimes does that. But the stewards should have been looking at that, and they would have done if it had been drivers further down the grid. There were also some interesting comments made by both drivers after the session. Sirotkin said that because the team weren't expecting a Q2 appearance, the Russian had no tyres ready for him, so he had to use a set from Q1, which of course meant he needed to push on his outlap to get the heat into them, hence why he arrived at the Mercedes at such high speed. And like Räikkönen, he also said that he didn't believe that Hamilton did anything wrong. On the other side though, Lewis Hamilton has said that Sirotkin overtaking on an outlap was a disrespectful move. Now, I kind of get what Lewis Hamilton is saying here in some respects. I think what he's getting at, maybe it's something that's discussed in drivers' meetings at the start of a weekend, that when drivers are at the end of an outlap and they're trying to make space, they won't go overtaking each other and potentially compromising each other's flying lap. So I get that. But it's a racetrack. We always see drivers jostling for position. But it's a racetrack, and overtaking a car that's going slowly, outlap or not, is not disrespectful in the slightest. Obviously, that's just my view though. Ultimately, I reckon that incident should have at least been investigated. And I really can't help but feel that we've seen penalties given for a damn sight less this year. I honestly do not believe that a 3-place grid drop would have been at all unreasonable in this situation. It wasn't just Lewis Hamilton though who found himself involved in controversy during qualifying. In Q2, both Sebastian Vettel and Kimi Raikkonen went out on the super soft tyres, but the team made the decision to call them in at the end of their outlaps to change to the soft tyres. Really a very clever move in terms of race strategy. However, as Vettel reached the pit entry, the red light came on, summoning him to the Weighbridge, a totally random procedure that is the same for all drivers. Despite being told by the stewards, as per protocol, to switch off his engine, Vettel drove onto the scales. As I understand it, he did eventually turn off his engine before restarting it and then driving off the scales, but that move resulted in the equipment being damaged, with the rear plates of the scales, if you like, being thrown off at the back of the car, and Joe Bauer decided to refer him to the stewards for that incident. There were some other things around it as well, which you can have a read of, including the full steward's explanation by following the link in the description to Planet F1. But that was fundamentally the crux of it all. It was rumoured that he could face disqualification from the session, but in all honesty, it's such an odd and specific situation that there isn't really any kind of precedent for it. But he was eventually handed a reprimand and a €25,000 fine. I bet that's going to hit him so hard in the pocket. So Vettel says that they shouldn't be calling drivers in when the weather conditions are changing. He says that he feels it's unfair, and I hate the term unfair in this situation. As I've already emphasised, it is a completely random process, and any one of those 15 drivers can be called into the Weighbridge when they enter the pits during qualifying at any time. That is a fact. And that has also been the case for a hell of a long time, and all the drivers should be fully aware of how the situation works by now, and also how it is handled by the stewards at the Weighbridge. It is not unfair. Unlucky? Yes, absolutely. He was very unlucky with the timing, I'll give him that. But it's not unfair. As I've already said, it's unlucky. It is just the luck of the draw. And yeah, we can sit here all day and discuss whether this needs to be looked at. Maybe we will in future. And perhaps the rule does need updating. As I've said, it's been around for a long time, and Formula 1 is a constantly evolving sport. So absolutely have a look at it, but that's not something that can be changed halfway through qualifying on a Saturday afternoon. So Sebastian Vettel, who's been around in Formula 1 since 2007, should have just got on with it, followed the procedure, a procedure he's been following probably through his whole F1 career, and then sit down with the stewards afterwards and say, look, I don't think this is right, can we review this over the winter? And I will say as well, I can't help but feel that if he'd just got on with it, it would have all been done a damn sight quicker and he'd probably have lost less time. But anyway, when it comes to the penalty, I think disqualification would have been a little bit too harsh. But, and maybe I'm just in one of those penalties for everyone moods, I don't know, but I would have probably dropped him 3 places on the grid, same as with Lewis Hamilton for the Sirotkin incident. I mean, by not handing out penalties for either incident, it has left us with Hamilton and Vettel lined up on the front row for the race later today, and that is a very tasty prospect. So, silver lining and all that. But I really do think he's had a very lucky escape. With no precedent set, the stewards could have easily thrown the book at him for this. Ultimately though, he did eventually switch off his engine. I mean, he should have done it when he was told to, but he got there in the end. And they were able to complete the weighing. Had that not been the case, then I'm pretty confident the outcome would have been very different, as that would have been a much bigger breach of the regulations. 2 very quick things before I jump onto my race one to watch and something a little bit different. First up, and both Kevin Magnussen and Sergei Sirotkin were summoned to the stewards for driving unnecessarily slowly on their in-laps during the session. Both were handed reprimands for those, I'm going to put in inverted commas, incidents. And something not really related to qualifying, McLaren announced shortly after the session that they will be competing in the Indy 500 next year, and Fernando Alonso will be driving for them. Some good news, and perhaps take some of the attention away from yet another miserable Saturday for the team. On to my one to watch for the race then, and you would think that I'd probably go with Daniel Ricciardo, with him starting down in 11th and likely to be doing some overtaking. But I'm actually going to go with Esteban Ocon. Okay, the pace hasn't been spectacular from Force India so far in Brazil, and as I said in yesterday's watch-along, they're sort of on the cusp of the top 10 in terms of pace. But he is out of position courtesy of that gearbox penalty. The pace is still good, and with a free choice of tyres for the race, he could spring a surprise. I'm not talking a podium or anything daft like that, although it is Brazil and we could get a bit of chaos, you never know. But I can see him picking up a point or two. But also keep an eye on Fernando Alonso down in 17th place, and with the power of that Ferrari engine, Kevin Magnussen starting 10th could well be doing some overtaking as well. Really looking forward to the Sauber-Haas battle this afternoon. Now this is something a bit new and is probably going to be a one-off, simply because I have to make some sort of reference to it, but my lap of the day has got to go to Charles Leclerc for his fantastic lap in Q2. The rain was falling and the youngster was in P11 and it looked for all the money in the world like he was out of qualifying. However, despite the damp track, he wound it up and went for a lap on the super soft tyres, On that lap, he was down in the first sector and very slightly down in the middle sector. It all looked over, to be honest. But as he crossed the line, he leaped up to 8th place and set a time that was only 6/10 off the fastest lap set by Valtteri Bottas on more or less a totally dry track. A brilliant lap and deserves a hell of a lot of credit for it. Unfortunately though, as with a few other performers, his lap got lost in all that post-session controversy, but big shout out as well for Marcus Ericsson and also for Sergei Sirotkin for his Q1 lap as well. And very quickly before I go, because I know you guys will ask for them in the comments section, here are my predictions for the race. I'm going to go with Sebastian Vettel for the win. He's starting on those soft tyres. That Ferrari is very quick this weekend, and I think he's sitting pretty there in second place on the grid. He's got to get it right off the line though, because both the Mercedes boys around him are starting on the super soft tyres, so they should be quicker at the start. When it comes to the podium, I'm going to go with Hamilton for second place and Verstappen for third. The fastest lap, I reckon, will go to Lewis Hamilton. He's just got that knack, hasn't he, of turning on a hot lap when he needs to. Driver of the day, again, assuming he finishes, I'm going to go with Daniel Ricciardo because, let's face it, he's got to get some overtaking done. And let's go with 16 finishers, so 4 retirements. Maybe not the chaotic Brazilian Grand Prix we'd all like to see, but I still think we'll get some drama. That is it then for the Brazilian Grand Prix qualifying report, if we can still call it that. And as always, they were just my thoughts, my opinions and my predictions, but what are yours? Who do you think is going to win the race this afternoon? What is your top 3? Don't forget to let me know your take on the Hamilton and Vettel incidents, and who is your one to watch for the race? That's a lot of questions, but let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Now, I will be back this afternoon at 4:30 PM UK time for the race watch along. And don't forget, I will be live after the race as well. And that'll be around about 8 PM depending on how long the race runs for. You never know in Brazil. And I'll be joined in the cool down room by Chain Bear and Jonty. In the meantime, though, you can follow me over on social media. Links to Twitter, Instagram, Facebook and to Discord are all in the description down below. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word. And until next time, goodbye.